Welcome to the Volunteer and Combination Officer Section webinar series. You're in for a real treat today. We have Captain Ron Smith of the Gary, Indiana Fire Department to talk to you about search and rescue tactics in single-story family homes. I've probably known Ron for probably 30 years, and Gary, Indiana has a lot of fires, so he has a lot of experience in this particular topic. And he's also a training nut, like many of us that come here. And I say that in a positive way. I warned him I was probably going to use this because I remember he gave me a koozie years ago. It says, bitch less, train more, because that's a good attitude to have in this day and age. But before we turn it over to Captain Smith, let me talk about a little bit about what the Volunteer and Combination Officer Section is doing. They are the sponsors and hosts for this program. We certainly appreciate all of you coming. If you're not a member, we encourage you to think about trying to become a member of the Volunteer and Combination Officer Section. We know it's expensive, but we try to provide a realistic return on that investment. So this is one of the benefits of being a VCOS member is the webinar series. We have ribbon reports out there on a variety of topics. We have one on behavioral wellness and one on cancer prevention. And we encourage you to go to the website, go to vcos.org, or just Google Yellow Ribbon Report and Lavender Ribbon Report and download those. They are free of charge, whether you're a member or not. We created a chaplain program last year for fire departments who might want to be able to or want to create a chaplain program. We got a report on that as well. We just finished up a canine support report. And so that's been very well received. And we hope, again, you can download that free of charge. We have Symposium in the Sun coming up in about a month. Clearwater Beach, Florida at the Hilton Hotel. If you haven't signed up yet, we got about 40 slots left, but after that it'll be full, and I'd say by the end of next week it will be full. This is like our 21st year of doing Symposium in the Sun. If you've never been, we encourage you to think about coming, if not this year, for next year for sure. We do still do in-person workshops. If you'd like an in-person training from the Volunteer and Combination Section on management and labor collaboration, beyond hose and helmets, dealing with people issues, fire rescue organizational guidance, please contact me and we'll look at how we can get that scheduled. So with that said, it is like I just give you just a quick overview of Captain Smith. I should just say Ron, because it's like that's what we call, he's just as down to earth as you can get. But Captain Smith has been on the Gary Fire Department, I don't even know how long, but lots of experience there. So let me turn it over to Captain Ron Smith. Ron, it's all yours.
All right. Yeah, I've been in Gary for 25 years. I started in my career in a combination department just outside of Fort Wayne, St. Joe Township. I got a lot of great memories, wonderful members that taught me many things. And I started off as a volunteer there, as a matter of fact, and then I got a full-time job, worked there a little bit before I went to Gary, but I have been in Gary for almost 25 years. The thing that we're talking about today is my involvement in the UL Tech panel for Search and Size Up. And I want to start with an overview of some of the other things that the UL was involved in prior to our tech panel study, because it kind of gives there's some stuff that you really need to know before you get to the search and size up portion. One of the big ones for me, I remember, and you may remember as well, Chief, the ventilation study. They when it first came out, a lot of people were saying that vertical ventilation was bad, and there were some misconceptions, and some people ran with that and said, well, we'll never have to do vertical ventilation again. And the truth is that ventilation can be good and can be bad. One of the things that I like to remind people is that firefighting is science. Sometimes everyone thinks it's just hard work and blue collar stuff, but it's all science and physics, and we have to remember that. And I've always been very interested in that as well. So if we were to break out all the windows in the building, the fire would grow. If we cut a hole in the roof with no water on it, the fire is going to grow. The fire doesn't know the difference between the air Uh, Ventilation has two components: exhaust and intake. Everyone always thinks of the exhaust, but there's also intake. If that air has to be replaced, and once that air is replaced with fresh air, the fire will grow. And then there was a big movement with the exterior water, because for the longest time in our history, I'm speculating here because I wasn't around 200 years ago, but we were throwing water in the windows because we just couldn't go in. We didn't have the SCBA, we didn't have the gear, and we didn't have the knowledge that we have now. So we would throw water in from the windows. And then, the interior attack was born out of necessity. You can only get so much done from the window, so you had to go inside and put it out. And it was so much easier to go inside once we got the breathing air to take with us. So that was basically we didn't do interior attack because we got air packs. We got air packs because we were already doing interior attack, and it was really tough. So some people got some of that information, a little bit of that information, and disseminated it themselves without getting the full study. And again, the study was exterior water. It wasn't a study for interior water. And then, like I said, some people took that and ran. They got the transitional attack, and there's really nothing wrong with transitional attack. Like I said, we've been doing it for a couple hundred years. However, it's not a good word to use. So they started thinking about, where does the water go if we do shoot it in the window? Because there's an old IFSTA drawing, a diagram that shows how aerial streams come in hit the ceiling and then bounce off like a billiards ball, which is not the case at all, which they found through the studies. And through that water mapping study, they used water mapping technology from the sprinkler industry to see where the water goes. So when the water comes in, and because of velocity and surface tension, it rides the ceiling and typically doesn't hit the middle of the room. So that was very instrumental in moving forward. And it was also very informative for people that thought, again, you see something in a textbook, you think for sure, well, they would never steer me wrong. That's got to be correct. But it's really just, it just doesn't work that way. You can do an experiment of your own, shoot the water in on a residential ceiling. It's going to ride straight across. You can stand in the middle of the room and not get soaked. You're going to get a little wet, but not soaked. And then due to some pushback from the industry, there was a need for an interior study. So they set up the lab in Bolingbrook. I believe it's in Bolingbrook. I should have wrote that down because I can never remember what suburb it's in. But the main UL lab in a Chicago suburb, they built simulated rooms inside a lab and lit those on fire, and had got a lot of findings from that. There was some pushback from that from our community, our people that wanted to say, well, that was in a lab. I don't go to fires in labs. That doesn't really pertain to me. However, I mean, it's really hard to replicate things like that. People will tell you every fire is different, but the physics and the science behind the fire is going to act the same way in the given space, and we know that. So, and there's a ton of since they started, it's been Safety Institution, UL, Underwriters Laboratory. And they're really looking out for our safety. They want us to be able to do our job as safe as possible. It started off for appliances and things like that, fire safety in the home. But as it has morphed into Fire Safety Research Institute, it's gotten a lot more, for firefighters. They've even done some experiments on toxic exposure for training fires. And they're really doing good stuff. Some people, there are science deniers. I mean, there's science deniers for everything. There's people that don't want to get shots of certain things or whatever. So it's normal for people to resist change, but they've done so many things with basement fires, flow path. Flow path is a word that we were not using for a while. Transitional attack, even though we'll get to that in a second, but that was a thing. And so they're doing good stuff. It's just how it gets out. Sometimes people get a kernel of truth and run with it, and get a little crazy with that. But so all those things leading up, because people would say, a lot of people said exterior water would steam someone in the building. So they had to come up with some instrumentation. Obviously, they couldn't find any live people that are willing to be guinea pigs for that experiment. So they came up with an instrumentation to simulate having actual skin, respiratory tract, things like that, so they could decide, get some data on what happens with the steam and how it would affect people. And then going forward, how are we moving those people inside the building? So that's really what came up, where we came to that was from, and that's how it's going to continue to grow, as far as I've been told, that once one study is completed, it's going to lead to another. There's always going to be something else like this with a single family. A lot of people are going to say, well, we go to multiple dwellings, or we go to 2-story buildings, and there's a lot of stuff that is going to translate, but there's going to be some more studies down the road for those type of things: multiple dwellings, 2-story buildings, townhomes. There's already some stuff in the works, and there's still some experiments going on. But our study started in 2019. I was notified in the spring of 2019 that I was selected to the panel. We had one meeting all together to discuss the experiments that we wanted to see, and then we some of those experiments kind of morphed from what some people would say and how that would react with the other people, what other people were saying. And then COVID hit, so there was a lot of remote discussions. Very unfortunate, because I don't think that any Zoom meeting or any even interaction over the phone or whatever would be the same as having everyone in the room together. So we kind of missed out on that, but the experiments went on as planned. There was initial, when Steve Kerber submitted the paper for the grant, it was proposed for 16 experiments, and he had those laid out, basically what he wanted. But then by the time we got to the meeting, he was able to secure more funding and get that number up to 21. So there are 21 experiments in total. Single family dwelling, ranch, basically a 4-bedroom layout, 2 bathrooms, kitchen, living room. And then going back to the ventilation things, we all know now that closed doors do incredible things. And one of the things my big takeaway from the experimentation that we did was there were a couple of experiments where we were able to shut a half-burned door, and it dramatically changed the conditions in the room. So even a half door, isolation is huge. What I'm going to say, a lot bigger than I actually thought it was going to be. So the like I said, the 21 experiments went on. We were able to, due to COVID restrictions, we were able to get a couple people at a time, and this wasn't necessarily nationally imposed. This was UL's rules. Only so many people could congregate at once. So guys would go out for various experiments. Of the 21 experiments, there would be 3 or 4 people at each one. So I was able to attend 2 different ones. So everything was exactly the same. There's 2 identical ranch homes, gable, peaked roof. they bought truckloads of furnishings. So down to the pictures, the containers in the kitchen, the carpet, the furnishing, everything was absolutely the same. So, again, the naysayers would come back and say, well, that was, what happens if, you had a bigger couch, or, you had different wall coverings. So everything was absolutely the same, as identical as it could possibly be. I made jokes about the llama picture, because if you watch the videos, there's tons of pictures of that llama. they got at Target, I think. It's pretty funny though, because it's in every living room. So that layout was based on a large portion of our fire duty, and fire duty where victims are found and rescued. So it was like 68% of all domiciles in the United States are single family dwellings, and a large portion of those are single story dwellings. So that was, you got to start somewhere, right? So that was, I think that was a great start, because it's going to give us a lot of information. Obviously, you can compound some of those findings onto other buildings. Smoke and fire are going to operate the same way. So some of the findings that were not necessarily shocking, but obviously time is bad. Dose of the toxic materials are bad. And if we can remove them to fresh air, it's going to be really good. One of the things that I've talked to people about, they were kind of surprised that we used to, if anybody's seen the firefighter competition where they pick up the dummy and drag it, that's obviously a horrible idea. That they have an unprotected respiratory tract, and we're in full gear with SCBA. If we pick them up into the higher doses, we're going to cause much more harm if they're still breathing. So we have to change how we do some of that things. There's a couple people or sources out there that will talk about where people are found, but the reality is people can be found anywhere, because people sleep during the day, so people are in bedrooms. Bedrooms are great. Hopefully people are sleeping with their bedroom door closed. We can get in there one way or another and affect that rescue. So that's one of the things that you may want to think about is, getting in the bedroom. If the doors are closed, it's going to make a world of difference. How's that going so far, John? Do you have any questions?
Sorry.
That's all right.
No, well, I guess you mentioned a thing that I haven't heard mentioned before. Real early in your presentation, you made a comment about science and physics. Firefighters don't really study that much. So can you have some recommendations on what information, how they get more information about science and physics of the fire dynamics?
Absolutely. Well, obviously the very best start is the essentials manual, or whatever we're using at the time, I guess, because there is a lot of information that sometimes may be skimmed over. Any live fire training is good, but you also need to know what's going on, because and that's where the science really comes in. Is if we're inside a smoky environment, we don't always see what's going on. We don't always know what's going on, and so having that science to back that up, really dive into the stuff that's in the manual, and then have the live fire. And then obviously all the FSRI stuff is available online. You can take all the courses. They do a great job of talking about fire dynamics. We used to call it fire behavior, right? fire dynamics and how that affects it, because typically we think about temperature, when temperature isn't necessarily as important as heat transfer. And another good fire dynamics model is a candle. Light a candle, put your hand next to it, not a big deal. Same temperature, put your hand over it. You'll notice, you'll realize exactly what flux is at that point. So all the UL stuff, and if you go back far enough, to go back into the NIST stuff, some of the stuff that they were modeling on, based on line of duty deaths or near misses, that's great. And FSRI is continuing down that road with near miss modeling. They just completed one from a fire in Georgia where some guys got burned, and I think they're working on one from Arizona right now or something like that. Don't quote me, but that's something like that.
Sure. Okay. Good. The other thing you mentioned, which I don't hear talked about very often, as it relates to ventilation, you talk about exhaust, and we are concerned about exhaust, but we're not very concerned about intake. So maybe explain that a little bit more. How does the intake impact fire dynamics?
So if we, going back to fire behavior, if we light a fire inside a building, it's going to consume some of that oxygen for an oxidizer for the flaming combustion. It's going to reduce the pressure, and it's going to want to draw cool air in to supply that combustion. So and I'm sure that at some point, most people have been to a fire that was either completely out when they got there or almost out, smoldering when you were surprised. We had a fire when I was at Sage Township that it pretty much burnt everything out. It was the room was almost cool, but because of the lack of oxygen or the lack of the intake on that exhaust, or no exhaust, no intake, it was unable to continue flaming, so it didn't burn the house down. So that's what, again, if we can isolate it, not just isolating smoke from sleeping areas, but isolating the smoke or the intake from the front door. And I'll get to this in 1 second, because this is actually kind of funny. But if we open the door, right, get there, force open the door, the engine's not ready with the water, that intake is going to be drawing cool, fresh air in order to sustain combustion. So that's why, and I know that it's been told, this is not new. So you force open a door, you want to control that door until they're ready to put water on it, just for that reason. If we don't have a bunch of cool, fresh air rushing in, we're going to inhibit some of that combustion. So I used to joke about and if there's any police officers listening, this is nothing personal, but I used to joke about cop ventilation. They would come with their mag lights, break out all the windows, and then point at the fully involved house because it got all the oxygen it needed. So if we can restrict some of that. Now, this is where, again, some people will take information and they run with it. Now, I'm not saying that you have to hang a curtain or any of those things. Those have their place too. But if we're coming in on a single family dwelling, if we open the door with the nozzle, we're okay. You don't have to close that on your hand line. But we do want to, if we're not flowing water, ventilation can be bad, because again, it's two parts. It's not just exhaust. If we could just exhaust it, that would be fine, but we're not. We're every cubic foot of air that goes out, some's coming in. So the restricting that, and like I said, with the bedroom door on the one fire experiment, when they closed half of what was left of the door, they closed that. It changed the readings in that room dramatically, to my surprise. But we should always try to isolate at all times. It's not just a tactic for surge. You should try to limit that intake as much as you can. Obviously, we're going to try and have. We want to get the bad stuff out, the dark stuff. it's much easier to see. We can move faster. We can get victims to fresh air, but we also have to worry about that intake for the flaming combustion. Having said that, once there is water on the fire, you should not withhold any ventilation. So again, that's one of the things that some people may not, they may take it and run with it. I'm not saying break out every single window, but you should get every window open that you can, every opening that you can possibly get after water is on the fire, because again, that's going to help the victim.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you. You talked about where you go and a fire's almost out. German Township had one of those years ago. I wasn't there, but fortunately they took a tick camera in the front door and car in the driveway, morning 6 a.m. So they figured, okay, somebody's still asleep, didn't evacuate. So they went in to do a primary search, closed the door after they got inside, and the guy saw a white spot on the tick, and he told the crew, the other two people, and this was a volunteer home response. We had 16 people respond at 6 a.m., which is a good turnout. And so 3 people on that first in hose line, the nozzle person or the person with the tick said, stay here. And he inched his way forward and there was a hole in the floor. And fortunately he's had the tick, or if not, we'd have probably had people in the basement. But the fire was about 80% out because it started, there was nobody home. It sucked all the oxygen out of the rooms or out of the house. And then fortunately, as they're responding, they did tell through dispatch, tell law enforcement, don't break any windows, because if they'd have broke windows, it could have made it a lot worse. And so a good point for you as well on the police officer. So you mentioned, but you didn't go into door curtains. Maybe explain a little bit about door curtains to our audience that may not have seen them before. Doesn't matter, if you use them or don't use them, but they are a tool.
Absolutely. So that does two things. Those door curtains, you can basically deploy a curtain so that your hose can go underneath. You can go in and out freely, but it's not like a closed door. But it's cutting off the exhaust. So if you're in a multiple dwelling, it's not going to go out in the hall, and it's also reducing the intake to let the fire grow. So they do, especially in multiple dwellings, high rise, which is not my expertise by any means, but they do have their place. I make a lot of jokes, I guess, but I made a joke about when they were talking about those curtains initially and cutting off the ventilation. I made the joke that you'd be able to buy them from the same company that sells you a fan, and that's true. It came true. That was a prediction that I had. But because wind is bad, I'm telling you, we've through a mishap and a very, very near miss, UL did take up the positive pressure attack. And I know that there's still people that buy into it or believe in it, but ventilation without water is bad. And that came from not only the ventilation study, but also the coordinated attack study. It's a bad idea. Just like if a wind-driven fire in a high-rise is very, very bad, then a wind-driven fire in a single-family dwelling is also bad. So that's people, like I said, we tend to get some people are change advocates, change agents. They want to change everything, and change happens slowly in the fire service for a reason, because if you could change everything overnight, we'd probably be hurting a lot more people. But some people get that information, like it seems good on paper. Someone tells them, "Oh, positive pressure attack is good. Let's try it," and then someone almost gets burned up. They decide that's really not a good idea, and then, like I said, you all took that up, and that doesn't does not work in experiments. I'll say that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings if they're really into it, but it hasn't been able to get any data with the experiments.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, they were being pushed a couple years ago, and I think a lot of people tried them. But like a lot of things in the fire service, we buy some and they just sit on the truck. And so yeah, so all right, so I guess one of the takeaways that you've said it a couple times here, and I guess for those that are listening now or listening on the recorded version, ventilation without water is a bad idea. And as Captain Smith has explained, once you put water on the fire, then ventilate however you want, so to speak. Control, how do you control ventilation? However you need to do it. But I think that's a big takeaway. So let's switch gears a minute, Captain, and give us some ideas on search and rescue tips and tricks. I'll give one that I was told, and I wasn't told this for a long time. But if you're crawling along the floor and you feel the heating and air conditioning duct, it's probably under a window, especially in our newer homes. So if you're disoriented and you can't find your way out, or you're still searching, you want to know where you are in that room, that may be a tip for you. And then, what other tips and tricks that you've learned through your experience on doing primary searches quickly and getting them done?
So one of the things that we were taught was the hands and knees thing, and that doesn't work very well. And for the most part, I've seen a lot of people doing that. I've seen people do that when they didn't need to do it at all. But the much better stance when you're doing a search is to have one knee down and one foot up and lean back, so that if anybody wants me to demonstrate the tripod stance, I will. But that's much better than on your hands and knees, because if you find a hole with your hands, you're more than likely to fall into it. And I have been, I've fallen through a couple things. Luckily, no serious injuries, but people get a little excited and they want to hurry, and we do want to do things fast, but sometimes you got to slow down a little bit so that you operate smoothly. Because if you hurry and you fall through the floor, you're not going to be doing anybody any good. Another thing that just drives me crazy, and it's still in books, is textbooks will say use the tool to search, and you cannot use a tool to search. Every time I do a search class, I ask anybody if they want to lay down on the floor and let me find them with my Halligan, because having an 8-pound tool swinging around in the dark is no way to find a person, much less like an infant or something. A guy won't let me do it when he's wearing a helmet. So I never ever swing a tool. Use the tool for the wall to remain oriented, but you have to use your gloves. We were looking for a known victim inside a building, and it was a infant that we were looking for, and I thought I found it, and I picked it up, and it turned into a pack of diapers. So if I can't tell the difference between a pack of diapers and an infant, there's no way you're going to be able to tell that with an axe handle. You're just not going to. And then we do a lot of searching in burn buildings for candidates, and there's no furniture in there. There's nothing in there. And then when you go to a reasonably lived-in home, there's a ton of stuff. And so, I mean, just looking around this room, there's no way you would spend about 30 or 40% of your time on the wall. The rest of the time you'd be on furniture. So there's some realism that needs to be at least, transferred to the candidates. We can't just, put them in an empty room all the time, and we can't always have them tossing furniture either, because I've never in my career found any victims behind couches. I'm not saying that they wouldn't be there, but you're more likely to turn the couch over onto a victim that's on the floor than find one behind the couch. Again,
you bring up a very valid point, about the training. that we train them on clean floors, and then we want to know why they can't find a victim when they're having to search a room full of junk. And I've talked to a firefighter who is he's still, this is like 2 years, maybe 2.5 years later, he's still very distressed because he crawled over the dead body twice because he didn't understand what it felt like. He was looking for a rescue Randy kind of body.
Right.
And when you're in the fire, when all the debris is falling down, that's not what you're looking for, or that's not what you're feeling for. And so it's like when you feel a lump in a hallway or on a floor, you got to go top and bottom to see if you can find the head or find legs or arms. So you're exactly right there. I liked your comment about the tool. One, you're swinging around an 8-pound tool. I mean, how long can you do that? Because that again creates a problem. Not just if you hit me in the head with the pick part, it's like just hit me in the head, period. And if I wasn't dead, maybe I'll be dead after that. So very good comments there. So any other tips or tricks that you've thought about?
No, just like you said, that being able to distinguish that from everything else that's on the floor. And if you've ever talked to anybody that's been to a fatal fire, they'll tell you, "Oh, I've crawled over bodies." I mean, it's just the way it is. If the ceiling is falling down, there's a bunch of clothes on the floor, or it's on a mattress, you're going to have a very hard time distinguishing that. So that's just something that we just have to tell them. Like, it's going to be hard, and you're going to crawl over people. It's the way it is. It's kind of a shock. We're not telling civilians that we do this, but we have to be real with each other. What's really expected. And so another tip that I guess it's a motivational tip, but there are some people they'll tell you that failure is not an option. And then when you do something like that, like you said, the guy's distraught for 2 years. That's a tough pill to swallow. If you were told all through the academy that you guys are the world's greatest cadets and you're hard chargers and you're going to do it, and then you crawl over a person and you miss them, then you're going to set yourself up for failure. So we got to come clean with that. We got to stop tough guys with the rookies.
Yeah, I do like that come clean comment because it's like we set people up for failure when we teach this in recruit class. Like, oh, every time you have a victim in the building, you're going to find them, you're going to hand them out the window to somebody else on a ladder, and that baby is going to live. And the reality is, number one, if you find the baby and get them out, if they didn't move on their own, there's probably a good chance that they are not survivable. And so but your comment about being more realistic is so important because it just sets us up for a mental failure. And like I said, this guy, he's still a very high functioning firefighter, still really believes in the training aspect, very good training officer, but he is just distraught over the fact that he crawled over a body twice and didn't realize it was a body until after they knocked it all down and overhaul was done. And that's another thing is like, when you look at, hoarder houses, because we don't usually have fires in houses that are all got clean floors, but are there any tips and tricks for hoarder houses on search and rescue?
I wish I had something that was good. I mean, I've been in a few. I haven't had any fatalities in hoarder homes, but I have had some. I had one that was just, you just wouldn't believe it if I told you all the stuff that they had in the house. It was the basement was almost full to the joist. It was crazy. There was stuff on the stairs. I was going upstairs to take a look, and I told the guy that was with me, I said, just stay here on the landing. Don't let anybody get on the stairs, because if I come down, we're both going out that window. And so I was crawling around on the second floor, and I hit my head, and it was actually the door jamb. So I was crawling on probably 4 feet of junk. It was crazy, or more than 4 feet. So I don't. I mean, there's really nothing you can do especially if they have, you know, pathways that they've been using, and that collapses on them. You're not ever going to find those people in a fire. I mean, I'm not saying give up, but I mean, you're just what are you going to do, other than taking everything out? It's just that's a no-win situation, and that's very unfortunate. But that's there's hoarder homes in every corner of the planet, so. It's not an inner city problem. It's not a rural problem. It's everybody's problem.
Yeah, and years ago we had a hoarder house, and it's exactly what you described. She had stacked magazines and books and newspapers, and she just walked through the hallway. And we did get in there and find her and get her out. It was a mutual aid fire, and but she had deceased. But it's like so and today, when I look at hoarder houses, I think here's a tip that I would tell you. Maybe look in the car before if there's cars in the driveway, take a look inside those cars. Because you know what? If those cars are full of junk, that house, or I shouldn't say junk, stuff, it's valuable to them or they wouldn't get rid of it. But if they got a car full of stuff, they probably got a house full of stuff also. So you're warned a little bit just by not just looking at the building when you're doing that 360. Look at some of the surrounding areas.
Yeah, that's outside the one that I was talking about was there was no indication on the outside at all. The outside looked nice. It was in a nice neighborhood, but man, this person just had so incredibly. We had to take the door off. Like people were trying to squeeze through the door to get to the fire. I was like, that's ridiculous. We'll just pop it off because you couldn't open it. There was just so much stuff behind it. And that's unfortunate. There's really, like I said, I wish I had a tip for that. I don't. Learn how to swim or something in your gear. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'm looking, don't have anything from the chat room. Don't have anything from the questions. I'll just, Ron, I don't have anything. I'm looking at my list here, notes I've been making while you're speaking. I don't really have any more. I think we did a good job of expanding on some of the topics you talked about. You got anything you want to share, the final thoughts or final comments?
Oh yeah, I wasn't. I mean, if we're short on time, that's fine. I wasn't.
No, you're fine. You're fine on time. I'm sorry.
No. I do have a couple of things because there's a couple of things that are controversial, and there's some things that, especially from our study, that you may not really notice. So when we were being briefed at the initial meeting, they put a slide up that said it was from the horizontal ventilation study, and they said that forcible entry is ventilation. So, and I had been on this little kick for a little while. So I took this opportunity. There was a slide up, and I had a whole room full of peers and scientists, and I said, well, if forcible entry is ventilation, then I cross the threshold and I take a look around. Is that VES? Because I'm not a big fan of I love the technique of VES, or what we refer to as VES, but I don't like the way it was explained, and I don't think it's a really good idea because when they added the other letter, which I don't care about. I'm not going to get on a big high horse about acronyms, but when they added the letter, so they say vent, enter, isolate, search. So are we isolating, or are we ventilating, or what's the deal? So I just, if you'll notice in the training stuff for our study, it says window initiated search. So I guess that you could get another acronym out of that, but we are ventilating and we're searching. So any opening that we go in, it doesn't matter if we go in a window or a door or the back door, or even if we cut a hole, even if we cut a hole in the roof and jump down through like Santa Claus, we're still vent, enter, and then conducting a search. So it's really just search. And that was my some people there was some pushback on it. They're like, oh, you're just trying to come up with something, some groundbreaking stuff, but it's not. It's just we're just doing the search. So if we come in the front door and we close it, we're isolating and we're searching too. So we should always isolate and we should always do the search because that again, that fire doesn't know where that air is coming from. It doesn't know that you're coming in a window. It doesn't know that you're coming in a door. We are able to in the bedrooms. Typically, we're able to isolate the door, isolate the room from the fire with that bedroom door. But a vast majority of the time, in hallways, in living rooms, in kitchens, we're not able to isolate. If we get in a basement, we're not able to isolate at all. So that was one of the things that I really was trying to push was, stop calling it VES. But if and then someone told me one time, they said, well, if I tell my chief I'm going to VES, he's going to get mad because he doesn't agree with the technique. But if I just tell him I'm searching from the window, then he's going to feel better about it. So I told that person, I said, well, why would anyone think that coming in the front door of a building I've never been in, trying to find the bedroom and looking around and trying to close the door, I'm crawling through the fire area, trying to close the door, isolate that room. Wouldn't it be much safer if I just went in the window and isolated that room and got the people out that way? It's a much shorter route, much safer. But a lot of people don't think like that. They think, oh, this VES, this is a cowboy tactic, and you guys can't be doing that. You're going to get everybody killed. And when in fact, it's much safer. It really is. You can have, because we know how doors work, so you can have fully involved living room and kitchen. You can have a bedroom that's completely isolated from that fire area, and then we can do that search very safely. There are plenty of documented cases. Baby that was rescued in Ohio via VES. I have a video of a neighboring department that had a fatal fire, and there were 2 kids in bedrooms that were long after the fire had been going. They plucked them out. So I just try to remove that. Not necessarily remove the acronym. If that's how you train and that's what's going to get you to do it, that's fine. But just know that any opening is ventilation, and anytime you look around, it's search. So people have been doing VES for hundreds of years by going in the front door and looking around. And I know that there's people that are going to be mad about that, but it's true.
Well, I don't mind making people mad if it makes them think. And that's really what we're trying to do here. So you did mention a little earlier, and a couple studies that they are owed, but a couple of NIST studies, NIST, on the McDonald's fire in Houston, Texas, where the collapsed and killed a firefighter, and then in Keokuk, Iowa, where we had 2 flashovers back in 1999. Yes. So if you're truly a fire service person that wants to study about the science and the physics, go look at those 2 reports, and then also go back to the UL website and look at some of their studies to help you understand what it is you're going to be confronting when you do a primary search. So I would add that to your comment about studies.
Yeah, that's absolutely imperative, because if you go back and look at NIOSH reports, I often refer to it as a low-hanging fruit, but it's every incident. Communication was bad. Somebody was out of place. They were out of their district. All these things, but when in fact it's typically building construction or fire dynamics that get us. That's what gets us, because communications. I don't know about your department, but my department is not really good with communications on a day-to-day basis, even information. So that all those things we get, I guess sometimes we get lucky, or we're just not confronted with bad fire dynamics or bad building construction. So if you go back and look at all those and skim off the top all those low-hanging fruit, communications, acting up, all that stuff, take that away and see what really happened. Because all the information is there. Sometimes NIOSH is a little bit whitewashed, if you will. They don't want to point any fingers at anybody, and I get that. I don't want to point any fingers at anybody either, but I do want to learn from it. So you have to kind of dig and read between the lines on those things to actually get that information. But that's the truth. That there's one of those two things is what really went wrong typically.
Well, you bring up, and I've said this as well, just like you, we say a lot of things from the stage, so to speak, but NIOSH reports are sanitized. That's what I call them, because they do not want to point the finger at anybody, or at a department, but you can look between the lines and understand what they had when they got there, what their staffing level was, what their response to the fire was, and then the tactics that they used, tactics and the tasks they used to help you learn from other people's events. And I'm not saying mistakes, events, because we all make mistakes every day. So don't point the finger at somebody else going, "Oh, look at that mistake those people made." We all make mistakes.
Yeah. Like I said, I want to learn from them, and I want to, I try to learn from my own mistakes too, because they happen. I would never say I don't make mistakes, but if you sugarcoat them or sanitize them or whitewash them, then no one's learning. So you're going to have to, hopefully, there's a couple internal reports that are pretty good, but there's a couple that are, they take that low hanging fruit as well.
For anybody that's listening, again, if you see a big fire, I shouldn't say a big fire, a fire where firefighters died, there are local fire departments that do their own reports, and Baltimore did one on their double fatality or their triple fatality back in January of 2022. Texas State Fire Marshal does reports on their line duty deaths, in addition to some NIOSH people do it as well. But look around and see what the fire departments are saying about their reports, or look for their near misses also, because you can learn a whole lot from a near miss report as well.
Yeah, I believe there was the one that I recently read again was the Oscar Armstrong from Cincinnati. That was a pretty good internal report. They they weren't pulling as many punches. I don't think they were, I don't think they were going crazy, but they pointed out some of their own internal flaws, which was good. I mean, it's good to learn.
Right. Oh, the first time I went to an outside class, outside my fire department, was like in 1972. Yes, I've been around a long time. And, what I learned and they were two FDNY people, Manny Freed and Bill Clark. Manny Freed wrote the book Fireground Tactics. Bill Clark wrote the book on Principles and Practices. And, what I learned from that, they're New York, FDNY, big departments, little bitty German township. The only difference is scale. They might have 20 people respond on a call. German Township might have 10. But the fire is basically the same. I'm not talking about high rise fires, but the fire back then was basically the same. So I learned from them, get out there in the world and see what other people are doing. That's how you learn. So we encourage you, both Ron and I encourage you to get out there. You hear of a near miss somewhere, call that fire chief up. Give them a couple months, but call them up and say, "Hey, would you be able to share?" Maybe they'll come speak with your fire department. Maybe they'll just talk to you on the phone, and you can take some tips and tricks back to your firefighters and go, "Wow, they had this fire 2 counties away, and this is what their chief told me, or their incident commander."
Yeah, that's a lot of times people that are involved in that, and I say this a lot. I encounter a lot of people in the instructor world that have been very affected by either a near miss or a line of duty death, and have really grown from it. Like, you can post-traumatic stress, you can get the disorder, but you can also grow from it. So there's a lot of people that are willing to share that trauma that they learn from, or they've grown from. There's a ton of people. The guy, I can't remember the guy's name right off the top of my head, from the Super Sofa Fire. Dr.
David, David
Griffin.
David Griffin. That's it. Yep.
Yeah, he's willing to share their stuff, and a lot of people are willing to share that you get the inside scoop from those people, because it is it's not a good way to grow, but it's very effective. A lot of people really they do push back. They're resilient from those events, and they're willing to share. Not everybody.
You're right. Not everybody. And I'll just tell this quick story on David Smith, or David Griffin. For him to talk about how when he drove the engine, he was the pump operator, and he was with a crew, 4 people, and he had to drive that engine back to the fire station by himself because his crew didn't make it out of the building. And when he talks about that, and you feel that emotion, you sort of sit in that driver's seat and go, what would I do? How would I react?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And like I said, there's really no substitute for that. I've had a couple members that went for a lengthy stay in the hospital. I've never had anybody on my crew get killed in the line of duty, but I have had a couple close calls, and it's definitely one of those things that it's very powerful. You just can't, for one thing, it's someone that you spend a lot of time with, and secondly, you realize it could be you, and that could be your family that's up in the hospital knocking on the hyperbaric chamber, right? So,
right.
Very, very motivational. Another thing that you touched on too is the staffing. You said in German Township, you're not going to have 50 people at a first alarm. So that's one of those things that you have to realize that all of this stuff should be done together. The best way to find someone is to go search for them, but the best way to put a fire out is to have a hose. And so those two things are very different. And if you don't have someone to do all those things, it's just going to be slower, and slower equals increased dose of the toxin, and then less likelihood of a positive outcome. So we can ask for it, but we know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen in German Township. I know what's going to happen in Gary, Indiana. You can ask for more people, but you're not going to get more people. It's just not the way things work. So you do have to think about that. I guess that's part of the size up component of our study was, where can I go? Because if I pull up and there is only 3 of us, I have to make the choice. Am I going to go look for somebody, or am I going to pull the hose? I can't do both. I just can't do it.
That's I'm working on an article on firefighting with 6 people, and basically firefighting is with 2 people, because you got an instant commander and a pump operator. And when I started doing some research and calling around, I have career departments. Career departments tell me, include us. We have 3 people on duty. I got to call back to get more people. We do it with 6 people. And it's like, okay, so it's not just a volunteer or rural America kind of thing. And it's in lots of career departments that may have 3 people on duty, and they're waiting on volunteers to respond, or they're waiting on the off-duty paid people to come back. They're having to fight fires with 6 people as well. Unlike Indianapolis, which I've said this before, Indianapolis could put 50 people on scene in 20 minutes. No big deal. Only if you're a metro-sized department. Yeah. Not smaller departments. I mean, Gary would have a hard time getting 50 people on scene in 30 minutes.
Oh, I don't. It would be that would include outside agencies.
Right. So, well, we're coming up on 1 hour. I don't know if you got some closing comments. If not, we'll end this webinar after you close this out.
Well, I do have one more thing. So
sure.
This came up recently, and I've been seriously thinking about it. So, it's going to take some critical thinking on your part and anybody else that's listening. So the part of the study was size up. So an ongoing size up is very important. We have to realize what's going. That goes from what you would call a traditional size up, what I'm seeing when I walk up, versus situational awareness, what's going on around me, and that's basically continued size up. So then, when it comes to actual size up on the radio, I am of the feeling that it's not as useful as we've been led to believe. Like, we get beat up. Like, I just the other day, there was one of my fellow officers gave a less than stellar size up, and people were complaining about it. And I'm like, what did it really change? So, New York City, when they arrive on the scene, first rig arrives on the scene, the officer will give 1075 code. It means it's a working fire. So they don't give an actual long-winded size up until the battalion chief gets there. He gives the exposures and what the buildings are and all that stuff. And I just, in my personal opinion, a critical thinker as I am, stepping back, I don't believe that there's a lot of merit in telling me, all this long story while I'm showing up. If you just said we're going to work, then I'm going to get off with the stuff that I'm going to get off with. I'm going to go to work. But I think a lot of times the controversy comes from people are just had it beat into their head. You have to get me. You have to paint this picture. You have to tell me what's going on, and it's hard for me to grasp the need for that. And that's, again, it's controversial, I know, but that's just how I feel with this. And it came about from the study. My size up of the situation is very important. What I'm seeing is very important, and what everyone on this fairground is seeing is very important. But what I'm hearing coming down the road doesn't seem as important to me, because I can't stretch the line until I get there. I can't throw a ladder till I get there. I can't break a window till I get there, and I can't even figure out which window I'm going to break until I get there. So I'll leave that with. Hopefully, the phone lines are blowing up with that one.
That is that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure. I'm going to say we can give Francini credit or blame for the initial size up on the radio. I believe he was one of the first ones to write about that, and it is an interesting concept of I'm on scene, I got fire on the second floor, and I'm going to work. Is that a good enough size up? I don't know. If you know your district, you probably know pretty much what building is in that neighborhood or buildings are in that neighborhood. If you got somebody hanging out the second floor window, you say that on the radio. I got somebody hanging out the second floor window. We're going to put a ladder up and we're going to get them down.
Yeah. So that's not size up. You're just basically that's a mini incident commander telling the next person, hey, we're stretching the line. You're going to need to throw a ladder when you get here. I think, unless they jump out before you get here, you're going to need to go get those people. Right. I'm not telling you what color the house is or the dimensions. Like, the dimensions don't really matter. That's one of those things that just keeps coming up. Everyone's like trying to, well, I think it's like 40 by 70, and it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I think the, that initial size up is important, but it's also what will change in the next 2 minutes after you go to work. So you need to look at that as well. But I think, it's like you said, we need to start thinking about things. Just because we do it today doesn't mean we need to be doing it tomorrow. That is one of the VSOS's issues, is we want to be critical thinkers and we want to challenge the status quo and get people to say, the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over again. So I was reading a comment, Chief, our Captain. We got, appreciate the conversation, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time. Enjoyed your perspectives. He is from, Stony Point, North Carolina. So we got one comment in the chat room there. So, and good, another one from Steve, guy out of Colorado Springs, Colorado Fire Department. Blah blah blah. So a couple comments. That's pretty good there. Anything else you want to close out with, Captain?
No, just thanks for having me on, John. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Yeah, we're getting some other comments now, so they know I'm reading them. I don't know where Stephen D is from, but he says, thanks for the information discussion. Be safe. Have a great rest of the afternoon. So, okay, well, with that, we're about 5 minutes past the stop time, but hey, Nan is still on here, our webinar coordinator, and she didn't come on and say, Ron and John, shut up. We're done. That's always a frightening thing. We do appreciate everybody coming. I think you probably can, if you need to get a hold of Captain Smith, we can get you his email address. You should have my email address if you attended any of these webinars. If you email me, I'll be glad to get you Captain Smith's email address so you can talk directly to him. Or Captain, you want to give it to him right now? Your email?
Yeah, it's GFDTRK4 at Yahoo. Gary Fire Department Truck 4, and pretty easy to find on the socials too if you want to look on all the socials. Training seconds as well.
So if you'd like to continue this conversation, some of the things he talked about, we got one. Zachary's talking about thanks for being in critical thinking and sharing some meaningful insight that makes all of us think. So great ending comments from my perspective of studying these things or trying to get these things. And so I don't know if Zach, if you're from Woodstock, Virginia, if you're a guy that just emailed me earlier today, I don't know if it's the same Zach or not. So, hey, we appreciate everybody coming on. And we do have webinars scheduled on Tuesdays. That's when we do them. So keep looking for more of them coming up. Next couple are on strategy and tactics. We've been doing a few on leadership, but now we're going to start talking about firefighting. We hope we get good attendance. So that is me. As Zachary said, that is me. That we emailed this morning. He wants some courses from us. So we'll work on that. So, but thank you all for coming, and we'll have Nan sign us off now.